Chapter 1. The False Accusation. The clinking of pint glasses and the low, rumbling laughter of his team were sounds Alec Thorne rarely allowed himself to enjoy. But tonight was different. After 3 months of grueling death marches, sleepless nights, and enough caffeine to kill a horse, their project, Phoenix, was live and it was flawless. To Phoenix, Leo Carter, known to everyone as Johnny, raised his glass, his infectious grin splitting his face. His favorite band shirt was slightly rumpled, and his headphones were, as always, draped around his neck like a talisman. And to the man who dragged us across the finish line, Alex. Cheers erupted from their corner of the bustling London pub. Alex offered a rare, small smile, taking a sip of his beer. He watched his team, a tight-knit group of brilliant misfits he'd personally scouted, basking in their victory. This, he thought, was the quiet life he'd chosen. No more clandestine government contracts, no more life verdict stakes, just code, camaraderie, and the simple satisfaction of a job well done. His gaze drifted across the pub and landed on another group from Nexon Innovations. The ACL team. At its center, holding court like a petty king, was Andrew "Andy" Vance. His suit was expensive but strained at the shoulders, and his slick hair gleamed under the pub lights. He was laughing, a forced, braying sound, while pointing condescendingly at something on his phone. Alex's eyes narrowed slightly. Andy was a virus in the corporate system, all bluster, no substance, and dangerously ambitious. "Don't let him get to you, boss," Johnny murmured, following his gaze. "He's just jealous our code gets more love than his keyword stuffing." Alex grunted in agreement, turning back to his team. But the brief moment of peace was shattered. As Johnny turned to head to the bar for another round, he jostled past Andy's table. It was a minor bump, the kind that happens a dozen times a night in a crowded pub. But Andy reacted as if he'd been stabbed. "Watch where you're going, you clumsy oaf," he snarled, his face twisting into a mask of ugly entitlement. Johnny, ever cheerful, put his hands up placatingly. "Sorry, mate. Bit crowded in here. Let me get you another." "Don't you mate me," Andy spat, his voice rising. He deliberately knocked his own half-full pint glass, sending beer splashing across the table and onto his trousers. "Look what you've done. You people are all the same, no respect." A confused silence fell over their section of the pub. Alex was on his feet instantly, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Andy's manufactured rage. "Andy, it was an accident. Let's not make a scene." Andy's eyes, however, weren't on Alex. They were fixed on Johnny, a venomous glint in them. "I heard what you muttered," walking away, thinking no one would hear. Johnny's grin had vanished, replaced by sheer bewilderment. "Muttered? I didn't say anything." "Oh, I think you did," Andy said, his voice now carrying across the pub. "Something about my kind, a nice little racist blur under your breath." The air went cold. The accusation was so absurd, so out of left field, that for a moment everyone was stunned into silence. Johnny, whose girlfriend was Nigerian and whose best friend was PXDaddy, looked as though he'd been physically struck. "What? That's insane. I would never." "I heard it too," a quiet voice added. Mark Sharma, a junior member of Andy's team, stepped forward, his shoulders hunched, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. He looked terrified, his gaze flicking nervously towards Andy. He said it." Alex saw it all in a flash, the setup. The rehearsed lines, the terrified pawn. This wasn't a random spat. It was a premeditated attack. This was Andy sending a message. Alex's team was outperforming his, and in the cutthroat world of Nexus Innovations, that made them a threat. "That's enough," Alex said, his voice low and devoid of emotion, yet carrying an authority that cut through the noise. He placed a steadying hand on Johnny's shoulder, who was shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "We're leaving." He shot a final look at Andy, whose face was a mask of smug victory. In that moment, Alex's carefully constructed quiet life cracked. He wasn't just a team lead anymore. He was a protector, and his territory had been invaded. The next morning, the dreaded email was waiting. "Verta meeting. HR Radiation." The meeting room was a sterile, glass-walled box designed to give the illusion of transparency while feeling like an interrogation chamber. Alex sat next to a pale, distraught Johnny. Across this table, Andy sat with an air of wounded righteousness, with Mark Shurkham up beside him, looking physically ill. The HR representative, a woman named Sarah, offered a weak, impartial smile. So, Sarah began, folding her hands. Andy, can you please walk me through the events of last night? Andy launched into a dramatic, self-serving monologue, painting Johnny as a violent, racist aggressor and himself as the innocent victim of an unprovoked attack. He used corporate buzzwords like hostile environment and unacceptable conduct, his performance honed for maximum effect. When he finished, all eyes turned to Mark. Mr. Sharma, you were a witness. Mark swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He glanced at Andy, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. Yes, I saw it. Johnny was aggressive. He said. The things Andy said he did. Each word sounded like it was being dragged from him under duress. That's a lie, Johnny burst out, his voice cracking. Alex, tell them you were there. Alex held up a hand, silencing him. He leaned forward, his calm demeanor unnerving. Sarah, Johnny has been on my team for 3 years. He's one of the most popular, good-natured people in this office. Has there ever, in his entire history with this company, been a single complaint lodged against him for aggression or prejudice? Sarah shuffled through her papers. No, his record is clean. And Andy, Alex continued, his eyes locking onto his rival. How many disagreements have you logged with members of other teams in the last year, particularly teams whose performance metrics have recently surpassed your own? Andy bristled. This is a character assassination. I am the victim here. I'm just establishing context, Alex said smoothly. A model employee with no history of misconduct is suddenly accused of racism by a manager with a known history of interdepartmental conflict, supported by a junior employee who is entirely dependent on that same manager for his visa sponsorship. It seems convenient. Mark flinched as it burned at the mention of his visa. The thread was there, dangling. Alex saw it, Sarah saw it, but it was circumstantial. The HR representative sighed, caught between a blatant fabrication and the lack of concrete proof. The company's primary goal was always to avoid liability, not to find the truth. An hour later, the verdict came down. It was a masterpiece of corporate cowardice. Given the conflicting reports and lack of definitive evidence, Sarah announced, avoiding eye contact, we cannot proceed with formal disciplinary action against Mr. Carter, however. A note of this incident will be placed in his permanent file. We trust everyone will conduct themselves with more professionalism moving forward. It wasn't exoneration, it was a stain. A permanent black mark on a good man's name, based on a lie. Andy's smug smirk was all the confirmation Alex needed. He had won. He had landed a blow, tarnished Alex's best man, and faced zero consequences. As they walked out of the room, Johnny looked utterly broken. A note on my file? For something I didn't do. Alex, what are we going to do? I'll handle it, Alex said, his voice a low promise. Go, take the day. I'll handle everything. As Johnny shuffled away, Alex's gaze met another down the hall. Elena Vance, the sharp, intelligent, content team lead, and Andy's estranged cousin, was leaning against a wall. She had clearly been waiting. She looked from Andy's triumphant form disappearing into his office to Alex's thunderous expression. She gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of disgust and understanding. It was a small gesture, but it was enough. An acknowledgement, an alliance. Alex gave a curt nod in return before heading in the opposite direction. He didn't go back to his desk. He went home. Alone in his apartment, surrounded by the cool blue glow of multiple monitors, the stillness in him finally broke. The mask of the calm team lead dissolved, replaced by something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. The institutions he was supposed to trust had failed. The rules were a sham. Justice hadn't been served, it had been perverted. He cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp in the silent room. Andy wanted a war. He thought he'd won the first battle by throwing a rock. He had no idea Alex was about to answer with a tactical nuclear strike. Alex's fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of pristine, lethal code filling the screen. He wasn't building a product now, he was building a weapon. A digital web that would ensnare Andy in his little pawn, exposing every lie, every weakness, every dirty secret. A slow, predatory smile touched Alex's lips. It was a wolfish, unsettling expression that no one at Nexon Innovations had ever seen. The war hadn't just begun. For Andy Vance, it was already over. He just didn't know it yet.